protections during these uncertain times. Our local governments must provide this support for all San Diego residents. And today our panelists will share what local government response has been to COVID-19 and what you can do to make our region a more equitable place to live in. Our panelists tonight are Savannah Dudar, our policy associate here at ACLU. Savannah is a graduate of California State University, San Marcos. She graduated with a BA in political science and a minors in women's gender and sexuality studies. While attending CSUSM, she served as the student body president, where she represented students on and off campus. As president, she placed an emphasis on civically engaging students, holistic wellness, promoting basic needs, and ensuring that the university was transparent and accountable to the student body. Savannah's past advocacy efforts include lobbying state and federal legislators for increased financial aid funding and funding for minority-serving institutions. We also have Christina Griffin-Jones, an organizer with We All Got San Diego Mutual Aid. Christina is a graduate of Howard University, a lifelong community organizer. Christina was born and raised in San Diego. She has worked alongside notable community, social justice, labor, faith, and nonprofit organizations internationally, nationally, and regionally, and has canvassed, phone banked, and fundraised for progressive candidates in every election since 2001. Paula Martinez from Invest in San Diego Families, she is the campaign manager there, is also joining us. In her previous role as the director of the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, also known as ACE San Diego, she facilitated community-led campaigns aimed at improving the lives of low to moderate income families. Paola has nearly a decade of experience organizing in San Diego County. She is the chair of the Human Relations Commission in the city of Chula Vista, is a 2019 fellow for Hispanas Organized for Political Equality Leadership Institute, also known as Hope Leadership Institute. She is a 2018 Flip the Scripts Truth to Power awardee and a graduate of the 2018 Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute. Last but not least, we have Jody Bakili, staff attorney for Housing Project Legal Aid Society of San Diego. Jody is a graduate of the University of California, San Diego, and of the University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law. Jody has been working in diverse practice areas in San Diego for nearly 14 years, including civil rights, securities fraud, consumer rights, insurance coverage, and now is a housing attorney for the Legal Aid Society of San Diego. I'd like to remind all of our panelists tonight to please speak slowly and make sure you pause for our interpreters so they can catch up. The first question, Paola, will be to you. Can you tell us how San Diego families have been affected by COVID-19 and the lack of basic economic protections that have come to light during this pandemic?
Hola, buenas tardes. Good evening, everybody. Oh, such a good question, David. So COVID-19 has affected our communities in a deep way, and not just because of the health consequences, but really because of the economic inequality that has existed in the institutionalized and systemic racism in our community. As we look at what has been going on in San Diego County over the last several months, we've seen that inequality has been exacerbated, and as folks there were already many folks in San Diego who were struggling to make ends meet, who had very little savings. The average San Diego family didn't have $500 in savings. So when this crisis hit, or they had to stop working, this obviously affected them in a tremendous way. We've also seen that these, families of low income communities of color have also been, struggling in what we know are, the lack of healthcare coverage, the lack of worker protections prior to COVID. And so, when you look at all of that on top of the the health disparities, folks are challenged. And one of the biggest things, right, that has happened is that we haven't really seen, California is different, but we haven't seen the response that we really needed to see in our county to protect the most vulnerable families. When you mix low-wage workers, who are the essential workers that have to go, that have had to go to work, that have had to expose themselves, it's no wonder that the numbers in San Diego are reflected the way that they are. We've seen that Latinx communities, right, Latinos and Hispanos in San Diego County are overrepresented in positive cases of COVID-19. Although Latinos are only 32% of the total population in San Diego County, the positive cases in that community is 67%. The same is for our Black communities. The same is for our Asian Pacific Islander communities. Our numbers are overrepresented because, we are the folks that are having to still expose ourselves. And when we look at it from the housing perspective too, folks in San Diego were already having to pay over 30% of their income on rent. So when you have housing overburdened families, and you have overcrowding, the call to isolate yourselves is almost impossible for families, right? Because they don't have access to, or the privilege really, to go out and get themselves a hotel room to be away from exposing the rest of their families. So, we see one positive case in a household infects the rest of the family, and we've seen whole families of color where, like, mom, both parents have been killed due to COVID-19. And, our communities are also the hardest hit because we don't have, we have low wage jobs that don't pay benefits. And so that means that we don't have healthcare coverage. And so we're not able to treat pre-existing conditions, or those consequences are more prominent in our communities. And so the positive cases, but also the deaths of the folks that are being affected by COVID-19 are communities of color. And so, when we started seeing what was happening, Invest in San Diego families put together a set of community COVID-19 demands as a response so that the county could, look at how to close that gap of inequality when it came to this. One of the biggest things, on top of everything else that I've mentioned, is the fact that the county did not provide information, and still does not provide information in vital, in all the languages that are needed across the region. It was a struggle to even get their daily press conferences translated into Spanish. But Spanish is not the only language that is spoken by families in San Diego. So if important health information is being released from the County of San Diego, then not everybody even has the ability to hear it or see it, because it's not even available in their language. Most of the information has been available online. We've seen that not having access to a computer and internet has also really affected communities of color. Lots of children, right, like didn't have computers. And so as you move people to having to all of a sudden like learn from home, these are the families, right, that things just kind of like snowball. And so I'm glad that, the county is taking, that we're pushing anyway, the county to take a different approach, not by everyone, right? Because some of the supervisors have talked about justifying in some ways the deaths of folks in our communities, and saying that not all deaths have been pure COVID-19 deaths. I don't even know how someone says that, but all of these things have pushed us to push the county to create a COVID-19 equity recovery task force. And so what we're hoping to do via that task force with, elected officials, community leaders, from community organizations, from healthcare providers, are able to sit together and really address the racial inequalities in our communities, because there is no question that is why the numbers and the devastations to community of color are what they are today.
Thank you, Paola. As a reminder to everyone who's attending, please make sure you submit your questions at the bottom of your screen under the Q&A dial. Les quiero recordar a todos que si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor, en donde están las letras Q y A, escriban sus preguntas en esa área. And I'd also like to remind all the panelists to make sure you're pausing and speaking slowly for our interpreters tonight. Christina, the next question is for you. Now that we know about the difficulties that families are dealing with in our region, can you tell us about the response of the community to this situation and the work that We All Got San Diego Mutual Aid is doing?
Mm-hmm. So definitely, so thank you so much for that question, David. So We Got San Diego, it started off as an idea of my friend Candy DJ Cutting Candy Custodio Tan. And she sent me a text message, and then I was like, yeah, I'm down. Following that, we reached out to a friend of ours, Kelsey, over at Black Women Saved My Life, to begin building what today is We Got San Diego. It really came from a place of we really thought inward on what kind of support would we want as folks with immune systems that have a hard time, right? I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I'm up at the top of that list, right, of folks who don't make it out of COVID. And I'm also at the top of that list, that certain board of supervisor that said that cases in San Diego are kind of people who were sick already, which that comment from that board of supervisors was really hurtful, because whether you have whether your immune system is already having a hard time, you don't deserve to die, pre-existing condition or not. So me, Candy, and Kelsey were joined by other folks in our community too, other really dope community organizers. And something that was really important for us was knowing that this work, that we are not the first ones doing this work, and that we really have to lean on current existing structures, give credit where those current existing structures exist. And to this day, right, we're really big on not recreating the wheel in like true organizer fashion. So we definitely lean on data provided out of organizations like this one, ACLU, and also organizations like the one that Paola is in as well. The community response has been a lot of folks wanted, because We Got kind of was born like March 12th. So a few days before stay at home or stay in place orders were released. And we all became very concerned about elderly folks in our community who maybe didn't have a family here in San Diego. We also became really concerned for people who had immune systems like ours that really didn't have a network as strong as ours. And, just being worried too about the fact that it was stay in place. If you don't have access to a debit card, it is hard for you to set up getting stuff sent to you at home. You really can't go onto the computer, or at least not back in March, right? You couldn't go onto the computer and ask for top ramen noodles and, without a huge delivering fee. So what our idea was, let's create a place where people can donate. Let's create a form community members can fill out what they need. And dignity and respect was a huge part of that too. Me and Candy and Kelsey and other folks with We All We Got San Diego and kind of the brainstorming room, we knew what it felt like sometimes that that the shame that can come with asking for help, and we wanted to make sure that folks didn't feel that shame, and if they did feel that shame, that they were affirmed with knowing that they weren't alone, and it wasn't their fault that they were in this economic stressor that they're always in. I want to lift up a quote from Vanessa Green. She's a organizer at Alliance San Diego and also the creator of Black Line. She said that what COVID-19 has done is really pull the covers back on our society to really show the economic inequality and also the vast racial inequality that's happening. We know that like Black folks and Indigenous folks are the ones dying most of COVID-19. And we also know that Black folks were already having a really hard time before COVID-19. And when you add COVID-19 onto that, it really exacerbates it. So what we're doing as community is really showing up for one another. We had so many people offer to be able to volunteer to deliver food to members of our community, that we were able to keep our community safe by not exposing too many of the volunteers to being out of the house a lot. And me, Candy, Kelsey, and the other folks, and We All We Got, we know how it is to be a broke volunteer, where you may not have the money to show up financially, but you do have the time. So it was really important us creating a structure of reimbursing folks and also advancing folks money to pay for people's groceries that they would deliver. And we're I think June 12th, right? I think that's like our 3-month anniversary. And we're still finding parts on when we can do better, ways in which we could be more equitable, and also ways in which COVID-19 is not only causing us to show up, like in San Diego when the National Guard was called in, that scared local liquor stores, which, if you a kid that grew up around the corner of a liquor store, you know that liquor store provides toilet paper, detergent, food, and it's also really close and easy to get to. So what we saw when our county when our city made that terrible decision to call in the National Guard, it scared businesses like liquor stores, and they closed down early, which the curfews that were administered in poor taste and a very bad decision of our sheriff to administer curfews that also caused for businesses to close early. So we also found an influx, an increase in requests from community members to get food delivered to them in areas where there was a curfew and food was no longer available. But definitely a lot of community members showing up for one another. And something that we've really been proud to see is folks who are even helping as volunteers, using we all we got to get help too, and also being able to activate, you know, the organizers on this call are going to love this, right? Using the folks who do get help and support through we all we got mutual aid, them being a part of providing that aid to community members too, and really trying to, you know, every day trying to remember our value, right? That this is about solidarity and it's not about charity. So thank you for your question, David.
Thank you, Christina. And I apologize, I tripped over the name of the organization. We got San Diego Mutual Aid. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Before we move on to the next panelist, I want to remind our attendees to write down their questions in the Q&A box, both in English and Spanish. Savannah, we know that renters protections have been something that San Diegans have been advocating for. Why is housing equity so significant right now?
Yeah, thanks for your question, David. As you framed in the question, advocacy surrounding housing affordability and tenant protections has always existed in San Diego. It's not a new movement. If y'all live here, or if you've even visited San Diego, you know that San Diego is not cheap. It's a very expensive place to live. And, you know, there's a lot of advocacy groups and organizations that are out there that are really pushing for broader tenant protections to ensure that there's security for all San Diegans. I think what COVID-19 has really done is emphasize and exacerbated the situation. It's really re-emphasized existing inequities and presented new inequities in our system, right? It has also brought in years of advocacy that have been poured into this issue area to the center of many of our COVID-19 relief-oriented conversations. But I think something we need to recognize and push our local elected officials to recognize as well is that tenant protection should not only be extended to individuals in the midst of a global pandemic. These are needs and protections that extend far past COVID-19. I think an example that, you know, kind of sums this up is that several jurisdictions in our county and including the state have established their own versions of eviction moratoriums to protect tenants from being evicted due to non-payment of rent. You know, this is a great step in the right direction, but I think it's really important to recognize that many of these moratoriums are only protecting individuals for temporary periods. It only pertain to individuals who lost their employment due to COVID-19. Tenants are also expected to repay their rents in many cases at the expiration of these moratoriums. And, you know, you have to be futuristic here. What about after COVID-19? You know, just because COVID-19 is over, quote unquote, it doesn't mean that the need for tenant protections diminishes. And it doesn't mean that financial stability is just appears out of thin air. You know, after months of unemployment or maybe even years, you know, San Diegans need help. They need that financial and fiscal support that's really going to make sure that they have access to housing. We need to think past COVID. We need to make sure that all San Diegans have equitable access to protections and safeguards that ensure their right to housing here. And we need to be futuristic with our decision making. That's really what it comes down to. It's also critical, I know it's been mentioned by some of our lovely panelists, it's critical to recognize that COVID-19 has a disproportionate impact on people of color and Black people as well. And they need to really be at the center of these policy conversations and at the center of all fiscal decision making because, you know, it impacts them the greatest.
Thank you, Savannah. Those are some great points. And I think one of the things that we've saw, it seems like this issue has been in the media more and talked about it more. Can you tell us how this current situation has advanced this conversation?
Yeah, as I'd mentioned earlier, COVID has really put housing protections and housing affordability at the forefront of many of our budget and policy making decisions, which is great. But we really need to keep the same energy year round, COVID-19 or not, right? In May, the San Diego Association of Governments released a report that actually details out our region's unemployment numbers. And what they discovered is that in the San Diego region alone, 510,000 individuals are out of work. and 470,000 of those individuals lost their unemployment after March 7th, 2020. How are we supporting them? What are we doing to make sure that their basic needs are being met, not only now, but in the future, past coronavirus? With unemployment on the rise, the city of San Diego also proposed and passed the creation of an emergency rental relief program as a response to our current state of affairs, and to kind of ensure that San Diegans are meeting their rent payments, or try to give them that support, that leg up. But we need to deepen our investments. It's great that there's programs that are being responsive to our current situation, but what about being preventative? We need to make sure that fiscal support is provided year-round for individuals in San Diego that lost far beyond COVID-19. The conversations really need to extend. They need to broaden. We need to push for preventative measures to make sure that security is, established within our communities. We need to talk more about the implementation of rent control, about landlord accountability, and we need sustainable and well-funded housing assistance and protections for homeowners as well. I think, COVID again has really presented us with some existing inequities and really thrown them in many of in many people's faces. And I think it's important that we're not only addressing the current need, but we're also, being preventative in the future with our fiscal decision making.
Savannah, you mentioned some of the work that's been happening, but can you go a little deeper into what the response from the state and the local government has spanned so far?
Sure. Kind of touched upon it earlier in both of those answers, but I think, there's been a lot of efforts from the state and especially local governments to push forth protections. The eviction moratoriums and the rent relief program is a great example of those. And it's a great step in the right direction, but it's also important for local bodies to realize, especially with the eviction moratoriums, that the implementation of several different eviction moratoriums can get confusing and really convoluted. Certain people living in jurisdictions might not understand, does the state eviction moratorium apply to me? Does the local one apply to me? Does the city of San Diego apply to me? So I think making sure that their eviction moratoriums are accessible, not only in language and not only in the protections, but also just the availability of language access. That's huge. We've had some amazing organizations, one who's on the call tonight, Legal Aid Society of San Diego, and several different other organizations who are really working on the ground to ensure that our tenants are well aware of their rights in these situations. And they've created so many documents that really highlight what, the protections currently are under the eviction moratoriums. I also think you need to place a huge emphasis on language access. It's important that all San Diegans are aware of their protections, not only now, but in the future. And it can't be done unless these documents are translated into a multitude of different languages. When you think about it, if you miss one language, you're missing a whole community, and not the whole community who isn't aware of their rights in this time and in this day, and that's just not okay. Moving forward, I think we really need to be proactive and preventative, and center our conversations and policy making and fiscal decision making around people who are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And that would be people of color and Black people as well.
Thank you, Savannah. I'm going to move on and ask some questions of you, Jody. And as a reminder to everyone, please remember to speak slowly for our interpreters. And for those of you in our audience tonight, please make sure you submit your questions using the Q&A button. I'm sure you've got plenty of questions and our panelists are dying to answer them. So please be sure to write in your questions under Q&A. Jody, first of all, Jody, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, excellent. We've heard from Savannah about local advocacy efforts around housing equity. Can you tell us some of the legal challenges that people face here in San Diego?
Well, I think particularly right now, just to piggyback on what Savannah was saying, is the availability of affordable housing and the fact that that is being compounded more than ever because people are losing their jobs because of COVID-19. And so just helping the community members navigate the different state, local, and city level protections that are in place. And I can dig into those a little bit more, but you know, as Savannah also mentioned, those protections expire, and that's going to be a problem at the end of the day. The money's still due. And if they haven't had a job for 3 or 6 months due to COVID-19, and then that bill becomes due come August or September, there's going to be some real problems there.
Thank you. You know, one of the things, and you kind of mentioned it right now, with folks facing uncertainty in whether it's work or for whatever reason and making payments, can you talk a little bit about the rights of renters and homeowners and how they can protect themselves during this time?
Yes, definitely. Thanks for asking. So I will say first, the CARES Act, it's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, was signed into law on March 27th, 2020. And that restricts landlords in covered properties from filing new evictions for non-payment of rent. There's a long list of covered properties. It's public housing, Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program tenancies, Section 8 project-based housing, Section 202 housing for the elderly, LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit properties, rural housing voucher properties. There's a longer list, and I think the link to the legal aid page has specific FAQs for each of for the CARES Act, for the Judicial Council rule, and then the county, state, and city ordinances. So if you want the really detailed version, I'm just trying to give you the highlights right now. The Act also defines covered properties as properties with federally backed mortgage loans. So if you have any question, you can usually ask your landlord to determine whether the loan is federally backed. And hopefully they will have that information. The CARES Act eviction moratorium is not specific just to the non-payment of rent because of COVID-19. So unlike the state and local moratoriums that require you to provide proof that you can't pay related to COVID-19, that your income is decreased or has been lost due to COVID-19, or you've been ill and diagnosed with COVID-19, the CARES Act doesn't have that requirement. As long as you live in a covered property, from March 27th for 120 days, so that's until July 28th, the landlord cannot file an eviction against you. There is no repayment period mentioned in the CARES Act. So that it says that the landlord can file an eviction with a 30-day notice. So we're taking that to mean 30 days after July 28th. So August 28th is when an eviction can be filed against you if you haven't paid your rent. Another important rule that applies statewide is the Judicial Council Emergency Rule 1. And that was passed on April 6th and is supposed to last for 90 days after the governor removes the state of emergency order. They actually considered revoking it, but they got a lot of negative feedback. So now they're saying they're not going to revisit that issue until August 3rd, I believe. But under this emergency rule number 1 with the Judicial Council, a court cannot issue a summons and complaint on an eviction matter unless it's necessary to protect the public health and safety. There's no requirement for it to be related to COVID-19. There's no requirement that it be due to non-payment of rent. So that's a pretty broad protection. And it also says a court is prohibited from setting eviction cases earlier than 60 days. And they have to postpone any cases that were scheduled as of April 20th. for another 60 days as well. And under the Judicial Council emergency rule, tenants are not required to provide notice to their landlord or documentation. It's important to keep in mind that none of the eviction moratoriums prevent or relieve the tenant of their obligation to pay rent. As I mentioned, that rent is still going to come due at the end when that expires. So that's going to be a difficult situation, and hopefully rent relief can come into play in other community resources. The county and the city of San Diego, and I believe about 11 other cities have passed their own eviction moratoriums. The county of San Diego says a landlord may not evict a residential or a commercial tenant for non-payment of rent related to COVID-19. You have to notify your landlord within 7 days of your rent being due, and then you have to provide documentation within 14 days. Documentation can look like, you know, a note from your employer, or if you own a business, a picture of your business shut down, bank statements, texts from your employer, things like that. They just, in mid-May, I believe, they extended the moratorium from May 31st to June 30th. So that's when that expires. And then it says that there are 3 months to repay rent starting on July 1st. And if you still are unable to pay rent at the end of that time, you can send an additional note to your landlord requesting an extra month. So if that's 4 months total. The city of San Diego's ordinance is very similar. It requires the rent or the notice be given on or before the day your rent is due. And then you have 1 week to provide the documentation. They also voted to extend the moratorium through June 30th. It was originally through May 31st. And actually at the this Tuesday, June 23rd City Council meeting, they are going to vote on whether to extend it to September 30th. So that would be really great if that ends up going through. And yeah, again, just if you can visit Legal Aid Society of San Diego, and there are links to in English and Spanish. Would definitely be great if we could get it in more languages, but those are the ones that we have for now. Have links to the CARES Act, Judicial Council, the governor's executive orders, and each of the city and county moratoriums. So yeah.
Thank you. And I got one more question to you before we go over to panelist questions. And that's simply, what resources do families have right now?
Well, it honestly varies from day to day and week to week. Whenever a new source of funding comes, for example, for rent relief or mortgage relief locally, it often is exhausted within a day or two because so many people have that need right now, more so than ever before. A good bet is to call legal aid. We actually got these new positions funded that are case managers, and they work hard and have been working harder than ever to connect clients with resources, funding, groceries, anything that they could need, even mental health resources. And so I think that that's a really good source of information that's up to date, and they have their finger on the pulse of what's available right now.
Great, thank you. We're going to go over to questions from the audience. Folks, if you have questions, please write them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Paola, this first question is for you. And it's simply, how can we help?
Good question. There's lots of ways that we can help. There are, I'll talk about, you know, from my perspective at the, from my perspective, I do a lot of work organizing to push our county government, right? And there are lots of opportunities coming up. I know that in the past several weeks, there was a huge number of folks taking action around the city budget. And really, that's an opportunity for all of us, right, to be able to ensure that our leaders are prioritizing the things that we need in our community, right? Like as economic impacts are going to be felt, as like have already been felt, but will continue to be felt because, county government are talking about significant cuts. And so as we look at those, at what those cuts will be, it can't be social services. It can't be, rental assistance. It can't be food access. It can't be healthcare. So we have to make sure that they understand, if they haven't already, that this is what our communities need and want. And so the county budget process is just beginning. The county budget is going to be released at the end of July, on July 27th. So this is our chance if we want, the things that I mentioned earlier to be prioritized. This is when we tell the Board of Supervisors that that's what we want. And there's plenty of opportunities in between. Our coalition is doing a lot of work to put that pressure on, because simply coming to Board of Supervisors meeting is not going to be enough, right? So we are doing our piece to educate our communities, to let them know, how, I don't know if some of you on this call know, the county budget, the county Board of Supervisors manages a $6.2 billion annually, or dollars annually. It's a huge amount of money. And so if we don't weigh in and if we don't tell them what we want, that budget is going to get, prioritized in a different way. So on June 24th, there's an ISDF town hall, Invest in San Diego Families town hall, where you can learn about the budget, get more details on the timeline, and some of the actions that are being planned as part of that. So stay tuned, log on to investinsdfamilies.org, and there's lots of information there. And also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The ACLU is a partner of Invest in San Diego Family. So I'm sure that if you all signed up to, to join us tonight, they'll be able to send information out. So, and someone did ask, like, how do I do this safely? Calling your Board of Supervisors, right? Like, call in to the meetings. This next Tuesday, there's a Board of Supervisors meeting. Call in. A lot of privileged communities are calling about reopening and talking about beach days and talking about golfing and talking about how their kids can go to gymnastics and how devastating that is, while our communities are struggling to get by and survive. So let's counter that message. And you can also join the town hall on June 24th. And again, there's going to be lots of other opportunities where we can, plug in and do it in a safe way.
Thank you, Paola. Jody, this next question is for you. What are tenants' rights when it comes to landlords who don't take strides to protect tenants from COVID-19, such as not wearing a mask, scheduling repairs and apartment viewings in tenants' homes, and so on?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't have the answer to it right now. I can look into that. That's definitely something that there should be protections against.
Thank you. The next question is, can rental assistance funds or resources be used by college students who rent bed space, multi-tenants in a room? Or have multi-tenants in a room, sorry.
Yeah, I can take that question. I don't know if that was directed towards me, but I can take it. Yeah, so the city of San Diego recently passed the emergency rental relief program. And within there, it's also important to note that it is being funded by federal dollars through the CARES Act. And it's also, in addition, being funded by philanthropic donations as well. Unfortunately, folks who are undocumented are unable to have access to federal dollars through the CARES Act. So, we're hoping that those philanthropic donations, and we, push that in our advocacy, at the city council meeting that those philanthropic donations are really prioritized for individuals who are undocumented. In addition, the only other exception are to people who cannot receive that rental assistance are folks who are currently already receiving housing assistance. So if you're a Section 8 voucher recipient, for example, you are ineligible to receive funding from that program. And I think that like brings up the whole conversation again of like broadening our protections and broadening the fiscal resources that are available to San Diegans, right? Because just because you're currently receiving housing assistance does not mean your needs are being met. You know, and I think that's really important to bring into the conversation. But yes, as a college student, you are able to use those funds.
Thank you, Savannah.
Oh, and if I can like piggyback off what Savannah
Sure.
said, on at weallwegotsandiego.com or weallwegotsd. Ooh, sorry, I don't know my website. Out here grinding, my bad. But check it out. We have some resources because just like Savannah said, that it is wild and it's terrible and sad, the folks that are like in the cracks, like especially like our undocumented loved ones. There's a lot of we have some resources on there for different funds folks can access. And then two, if you're as we know, for some, you know, poor folks, we know how to go out there and try to find resources. If you are having trouble making ends meet, like, you know, hit us up at We Got San Diego and fill out our form and we'll try to get funds to you. Also, if you are a Black woman or someone who identifies as being Black and femme, Black Women Deserve have a mutual aid, and they'll assist you if you are undocumented and a Black woman or femme as well.
Thank you, Christina. And this question, actually, you might know the answer to this question. If not, I think Savannah knows it. Is there an option to comment publicly on the upcoming San Diego City Council vote on extending that protection that Jody mentioned to September? The rental referral protection?
Savannah, or do you want to take that one? Because I'm just planning on calling in and trying to get through.
Yeah, I'm not actually aware of like a specific date, but I will say that the city is, you know, posts all of their dockets online, all of their agendas and their upcoming hearings. And I think calling in is a great option, and also leaving an electronic comment as well is really important, because it's important that the voices of our community are being heard here, right? And like that, those extensions of those eviction moratoriums is like a great step in the right direction. But hopefully we'll see, you know, more preventative change in the future. But yeah, I really suggest keeping up with the city's website and just scoping out their agendas.
I'll jump in really quick. I believe it's being voted on the 23rd, which I have no sense of what day is what, but I think that's Tuesday or?
That's Tuesday.
Okay. So yeah, if you can just, they have on their website and under the city council tab, the directions for calling in for public comment.
Thank you. Jody, while you're here, let me ask you, you know, one of the questions that we got, and I know you started to go through some of these already, but if you can lay them out for folks, when eviction moratoriums are ending, there's some, you know, some folks think that it's at the end of this month, other folks think it's a little longer. Can you walk us through sort of, and I know it's different by county and city, so to the degree that you have those, would you mind going through them?
Yeah, let's see. I have a handy dandy little chart here. So the governor's executive order already expired on May 31st, but he did extend the ability for cities and county governments to extend their own moratoriums, and a couple of cities took them up on that. The CARES Act, as I mentioned, is slated to expire the 25th of July as far as the eviction moratorium aspect. The Judicial Council rule is supposed to expire 90 days after the governor lifts the state of emergency, but they are going to revisit that on August 3rd, I believe. The city of Carlsbad's already expired and it only applied to commercial tenants. The city of Chula Vista recently extended theirs until June 30th. And then they have 6 months after June 30th to repay rent. The city of Encinitas, the moratorium is set to expire either when the governor terminates or withdraws his order, or when the local emergency, when Encinitas says a local emergency is lifted, whichever comes sooner. And then they also have 6 months from that date to pay back rent. The city of Escondido expired on May 31st, and they did not take actions to renew that. The city of Imperial Beach amended their eviction moratorium to match the executive order. So that expires on the 28th of July. And there's no language about the rent payback period. So we assume that upon, July 29th, rent will be due. National City, again, also was written such that it should reflect the executive order. And because that was extended, we are saying that the National City Eviction Moratorium should expire on the 28th of July. And then 6 months of a payback period from that point. Oceanside's expired on May 31st. The city of Poway's also expired on May 31st, and it only applied to commercial tenants. The city of San Diego, as I mentioned, expires on June 30th, but they are considering extending it to September 30th. They believe they have the votes to extend it, but they're not sure if they have the political will to extend it to September 30th. So hopefully that ends up coming to fruition. And then the county of San Diego's expires on June 30th. And then there's 3 months from July 1st to repay, and then you can request an extra month. The city of San Marcos expires June 30th. And then it doesn't specify a period for back rent. And then the city of Santee already expired on the 31st of May. And that's all that we have the information on.
Thank you, Jody. And for those of you who want to look at those, the website for Legal Aid Society is in the chat. So feel free to write that down and go on there to look those up as well. All right, so the next question is for all panelists. So feel free to jump in if you know a bill or a measure that's coming up. The question is, are there any bills or measures coming up that we as voters can keep an eye out for to support these issues of healthcare, food, and housing, especially as they relate to racial inequality and systemic racism?
I know Paula will talk more about this, but like definitely getting involved in all the budget hearing stuff. Our city and county is getting so much freaking money, and like definitely with we got San Diego hat on, like they want to give it all to the cops, and they shouldn't. Police have enough money, they need less. COVID-19 money, it should go to like making sure our folks' rent are paid, regardless of like our status, right? Like, yeah, someone put in the comments, police need none. Yes, they need less money. Abolish police. Did I say that? Yeah, I did. Oops. No, sorry, not sorry. But definitely get involved, please, in those budget hearings. And really encourage the work that Paula is doing. Those are great recommendations, and like definitely getting involved in that, because what we saw at San Diego City's budget hearing, we saw that a lot of the money that was being taken away from from social services, mental health services, rent help for our community, and food access, It went to police. And we have a great chance, right, to show back up in about 3 more months, or 2 months, I think. And we'll get a chance to be engaged in those budget hearings. But that's definitely something I'm really looking up and looking forward to. And also other cities have their budget hearings coming up too. So Paula, I'm definitely going to be in that Invest in San Diego Families call to learn more. But yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Paula, can I, and feel free to answer this question, but let me throw this one out there for you as well. Can you give an update on the disaster relief assistance for immigrants, or DRIA program in California?
So in terms, let me piggyback off of Christina's comment just really quickly before we move to that. Of the general revenue fund that the county, manages, so it's not the total budget, right? And this is why it's so important for you all to come to the June 24th meeting, because we'll have the number experts. I'm an organizer, right? So I don't know that side of it as much. But the general revenue fund is like the discretionary money that the county moves every year, and that of that fund, 56% is the average of how much goes towards policing and public safety. So that is the same, that's the same pot of money, right? Like that when we ask for a local rental assistance program, that when we look at help for undocumented immigrants, that would be the money that would be used for that isn't allocated already or earmarked for something else. Those would be those same funds. So really the push has to always be that those general revenue funds go less to policing and more towards the services that we need, especially in these times. And then to your question, David, I'll say that I don't have like the most updated information. I do know that the 500, that the state had money allocated for this, and that the $500 that were meant for each family, I think that was the limit. Didn't go far enough. And I know that locally, JFS, Jewish Family Services, they were the ones who were distributing those funds. So I know Esmeralda is on the call, so I don't know if we could ask Esmeralda to chime in on this, but I think she would know more than I do on this.
Okay, we'll put the number up and for JFS so folks can call in and get those services. We've got a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to closing remarks. One of the questions that we got was, how do people know what protections apply to them when it comes to, how do tenants know which protections apply to them, whether it's local or state, and if one offers more than the other, what actually covers them?
Are you asking me?
Sorry, yeah, Jody.
So basically, whichever's the most protective that you qualify for is what you should try to operate under. But it is difficult to navigate, and that's why we're here, is to help people through that. But yeah, I would say the Judicial Council is the one in place that applies to all of California, and I think that's the most protective right now. And then after that, whatever either if you live in an incorporated city, then that city's eviction moratorium, or if you live in an unincorporated area, then the county of San Diego's. And also the CARES Act protections, which is if you're in public housing or have a federally backed mortgage property.
And if I could just add to that, David, so in my previous role with ACE, who do amazing housing work, part of the challenge, especially in San Diego, is that there's lack of tenant protections, right? Like we don't have enough protections, and our local governments don't do enough to disseminate that information. And I think Savannah did, talked about the lack of access to that information in multiple languages. Some of our Bay Area cities have things like rent control. And so within those ordinances, there are, offices that are there just to protect tenants and to help navigate the difficult housing system. And because we don't have any of those things in place, we're farther out from knowing what our rights are. And so, even as I know that there's still, some work being done to push for those types of protections locally in different cities. In National City, there's been a push. In Chula Vista, there's been a push. In the city of San Diego, there's been a push. So I think calling everybody on the call to action, like this is exactly why we need to get, ourselves together and fight, because if we don't do it now, and if we don't come together now and really understand just how backwards the system is and how far away we are from where we need to be, then things are going to get significantly worse.
And if I could piggyback too off of what Paola said, there are so many services, and it does seem very overwhelming to go out there trying to find out what is for you. It is really important in this time, right, to know that COVID-19, right, has now, and those of us experiencing struggle during this time, we are also just another piece of the legacy of just terror on poor communities and communities of color and Black communities and Indigenous communities. And understanding that this moment, this stress that we are feeling, for some of us, the first time feeling it during COVID-19 times, people in our community have been feeling it forever. And also honoring that there are some organizations that exist now that have been doing this work for a really long time. So as you do feel motivated to go out there, and I'm explicitly talking to my white folks, right? If you feel out there I want to go out there and I want to create something new, no, stop, research, because chances are there's a Black woman or a Latinx woman leading that work. And guess what? She needs you to follow her lead. And that's the same for our folks who are also in struggle right now. You don't know where to go. You don't know where to start. Sitting down, getting your notebook out, charting out what you need, and getting to it, right? And also getting politicized and activated. A lot of us on this panel, right, we are in this work because we personally felt how injustice feels. And as an organizer, as an activist, as a person involved in this work, that's your battle scar. So COVID-19, for a lot of us who maybe haven't had to live in this type of stress before, all right, that's your battle scar. Now, you know what? It's time to get involved, connected, and engaged. And it's also important that you pay homage to the ancestors, to the people who've come before you, that have been fighting this fight before you woke up and you were broke. You feel me? And also honoring and paying homage to those folks who've been poor already and been in struggle. Those folks who've been Black already and in struggle. Those folks with disabilities who, me again, like someone with a tricky immune system, I'm learning a lot from folks in the disability rights, justice environment on how they've been able to be engaged when they have never been able to attend a protest, because we don't center disabled folks, right? We can't guarantee their safety, right? But they've still been in this fight. So that's definitely a huge one for me, right? Paying homage, being rooted and grounded in the fact that it's work that has been being done in these areas before, and getting behind a Black woman, a Latinx woman, and following her lead, right? And also, if this is your first time experiencing struggle like this, like my grandma says, send one up to Jesus, say, thank you, Lord. And also knowing that you gonna make it through, and we're gonna make it through together. And for the folks out there who've been in struggle this whole time, the time is now for us to turn up and act up. People are in the streets right now. This is an uprising, right? People are in city council meetings saying, this isn't okay. Get active, get involved. This is the time for us to demand the stars.
Indeed. And that's actually a great place to end our Q&A, and on those notes. We are going to turn around now and ask our panelists for their closing remarks. Keep it short, you all. We've all had a long day, so keep it short. But please give your closing remarks. And I know you all have calls to actions for how our audience tonight can get involved. So please include those. And I think I started with Paola at the beginning. So this time I'm going to start with Jody, if you can give us a few closing remarks and a call to action.
I just want to say thank you for everybody who's here after work hours. And as Christina said, it is an uprising, and it feels like it never has before, for me anyway, as a white lady. But we're not really allowed to have calls to action as Legal Services Corporation. So I will just say, as I mentioned, that legal aid is here for this type of need. We have clinics, we have case managers that can connect clients to services. And I know that they definitely work with a lot of the organizations that have already been established in San Diego. So if you come across people that need that, please send them our way, and we will do whatever we can do to help them.
Thank you, Jody. And again, the website for Legal Aid Society of San Diego is in the chat. Savannah.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the importance of showing up. I think now more than ever, it's important that we really show up at our city council meetings, show up at our county board of supervisors meetings, and let them know the experiences that people of San Diego are facing, and really emphasizing that, right? Throughout the budget process, throughout the year. Again, like I stated, keep the same energy that's happening now, forever, hopefully, right? And a little bit of action to take is, thankfully, through the advocacy of a lot of different organizations and amazing advocates, the regional COVID-19 task force for equitable recovery was recently created at the county level, which is super exciting. The first meeting will be happening next Wednesday, June 24th at 4 p.m. The details are to come. I would suggest keeping posted with board supervisor Nathan Fletcher's channels, just to see how to get in and how to watch. That would be a great place, to really voice what's been going on and the experiences that y'all have been facing and what you've been seeing. So yeah, I think that's a really good action step to take away. And also donate to mutual aid funds, donate to We Got San Diego. All those steps are super important, and get involved with the budget process as well, like ISDF is doing.
Savannah, what was the name of the task force?
It's in the chat as well. It's the Regional COVID-19 Task Force for an Equitable Recovery.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Savannah. Christina, can you give us your closing remarks? And you got us riled up, so you set a high bar.
It's okay. I'll make it quick. Something that is really important, right? We got San Diego. We're really we're a little ratchet, little revolutionary, little righteous group of folks serving our community. And we understand that like racial inequality, especially anti-Black racism, is the huge part of why the folks who we are helping need that help. Point of action, right? Please, reach out to and call the office of Mayor Faulkner and tell him to stop giving police so much money, and to stop taking credit for Black women's ideas. Right now, after, Mayor Faulkner is going around saying that he created the Race and Equity Office when he didn't. That idea was from Councilmember Monica Montgomery and other really dope city council members. So that's a big thing of action. And also, just for like all my folks out here and on this panel, right? Who've been doing this work for, it seems like a million years, right? Trying to fight for fight against racial inequality, and fight for like economic justice. Y'all, we're doing it. And the reason our communities are able to move in traction like they are is because of the freaking railroad tracks that we laid down. And understand, and people who are new to this fight, please pay homage, right? Because this work that, it seems like you've been able to flow right into, it is because of Black organizers, brown organizers, Indigenous organizers who've really been holding the line. And you know what? We're tired, but we're still out here. So we gotta, for new folks joining this work, know that it just didn't appear out of nowhere. For old folks that's been in this work together, y'all, we just gotta hold on. We just gotta hold on. We're almost there. And this is an uprising, y'all. No more, like they say, aim for the stars, land on a cloud. Right now, it's looking like we're gonna get the stars. But we gotta keep going, keep the energy up. Thanks.
Thank you, Christina. Paola?
I don't even know what to say after that. Christina took every single thing that I was gonna say. Oh, just kidding. No, it's been a pleasure to share space with you all. I've already said it a couple times. This is the time to plug in. So June 24th, we've got the ISDF Town Hall. I shared the website on the chat, and you can go on there under event and you can log in, and you can sign up to join the ISDF Town Hall. Someone already shared in the chat as well. The Regional COVID-19 Task Force was created officially yesterday. We're very excited for that. That was a joint effort with the ACLU, Invest in San Diego Families, and the support of Supervisor Nathan Fletcher. So the first meeting is happening at 4 o'clock on the 24th. That is where we're hoping these types of conversations are happening with folks that, are community-led, where we have elected officials who can then take it back to their cities, take it back to the jurisdictions that they represent, and implement the policies that we need them to implement. So this is a good opportunity, and it's open to the public. So, move into that platform as well. And on July 7th, Invest in San Diego Families is planning an action at the Board of Supervisors meeting. It is a combination of caravan and in person for those who want to participate, obviously, with social distance involved, but it's also a Board of Supervisors meeting. So there'll be an opportunity to either, join the caravan outside of the Board of Supervisors meeting, or also call in to the meetings. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is that we share the struggles that we're facing, so that they hear it, so that they center that in how they're building their budget. This is the right time to do it. So plug into that. And again, it's been a pleasure sharing space with you. I'm re-energized. I am tired, but as an organizer, hope is my drive. So this gives me the hope, right? There was a moment there where we were not quite seeing the stars and didn't even think we could land on the clouds, but we're gonna get there, and we probably won't get the stars. So I will say that, right? As organizers, we aim very, very high, but we know that we're shifting that narrative and that we're gonna inch closer to what our ancestors have been fighting for hundreds of years. So with that, thank you.
Paola, Cristina, Savannah, Jody, thank you for the information you shared with us today and for the work that you continue to do in the community around economic justice and housing equity. And yes, we can get those stars, darn it. Thank you to Keelan, to Jennifer and Andrea for supporting us with ASL and Spanish interpretation tonight. For those of you joining us, I hope this webinar was informative and inspired you to take action. None of us can do this alone, but together we can bring down the mightiest walls of oppression. So at the close of this webinar, you will be directed to take a survey where you can share your feedback with us. Please be sure to complete the form so we can improve the webinar experience for others. This is the third of our five-part webinar series. Next week, we will be talking about support for individuals experiencing homelessness, which will provide a discussion on the ongoing efforts and challenges for the homeless population in our region. And will include actions you can take to support the work of our coalition partners. Thank you again for joining us this evening as we continue to work to flatten the curve of inequality. Good night, everyone.